morning, everyone. My name is Howard, and I too am a recovering architect, now a marketing consultant, living and working in Hawaii. Yes, people do work in Hawaii. And the last couple of years I've been spending more time in Asia than at home. And that's because my biggest client happens to be there. So I'll tell you a little bit about them, a little bit about what I've been doing, and hopefully there will be nuggets that will apply to your situations and your companies, even though I suspect a lot of you are not currently doing work internationally. Just for a show of hands, how many of you do have either offices outside the US or work outside the US? Okay, good. That's more than I thought. We also have other things in common besides working internationally, and I will touch on some of those things and see if it resonates with you. First, I'm flying solo here without a net. This is an architect speaking without visual aids. This is not my presentation, but forgive me if I point to the screen now and then as if something were up there. So maybe there is a title slide up there, and it's called a little background. So I'll give you a little background on the company that I'm working with. It was started by a woman from India. She started the company in Singapore. She grew it to about 200 people in 6 years and had 6 offices, and discovered, I don't enjoy my work anymore. She liked getting business and she liked doing design, and she was instead having to deal with HR issues and finance and accounting and all this other stuff. So she brought in a CEO who happened to be her husband. He was from a non-design background, but kind of a serial entrepreneur, very smart, very much a business person, had started several companies, had invested in other companies, had smarts to run a business, but no understanding of the business. So together they made a good team, actually, and he helped grow the company. Fast forward another 6 years, 6 more offices, 450 people, and that's when I came in. They had a chief marketing officer. He didn't work out, and I think it was largely a cultural mismatch. And what they decided, instead of just replacing him immediately, that they would rent a CMO, and that was me. And they found me because they were interested in getting some systems in place, having somebody who understood the industry, having somebody with some international experience. In my previous firm, I had helped grow to the point where when I left, we were working in 160 countries. And I said, look, I'm not moving. I love my life and I love my wife. They're both in Hawaii, but I am free to travel. So I took, I think, last year alone, six-week trips to Asia, from usually to their headquarters in Singapore, and then side trips once I was there working with other offices in Asia. So 12 offices total. Interesting collection of people. I learned a lot in the process. Part of my job was to help train and mentor and coach their marketing people, as well as some of their senior leaders who were expected to do some marketing and business development. So back to the CEO. He, like a lot of CEOs, was interested in what you can measure. If you can't measure it, it doesn't matter. He was also, unlike a lot of companies I've worked with, who say, you know, growth is not really a goal of ours. If we do good work and we grow, it'll be a byproduct. But this guy was unabashedly all about growth. Growth to him was a sign of success. He wanted to grow. He was also looking to be successful in the eyes of his clients and his peers. And his clients told him about this thing called NPS, Net Promoter Score. And Brian mentioned yesterday that I would tell you what that is. I assume most of you already know, but for those who don't, it's a single question. Unlike the client feedback tool questions, it's not a 7-point scale. It's actually an 11-point scale, going from 10 down to 0. The question is, how likely are you to refer or recommend our firm to your colleagues or peers? And it goes from 10, very likely, to 0, no way in hell, or absolutely not, or something like that. So the top scores are considered promoters. At the bottom, they are considered detractors. In the middle, they're just kind of passive. So the way the NPS, or Net Promoter Score, is calculated, it's the promoters, the percentage of promoters, minus the percentage of detractors, and you get a number. And that number can vary from minus 100 to plus 100. So he's very interested in this, especially because the firm's clients were using it. I was able to suggest to him that, in addition to looking at that one question, that we do a more comprehensive shift of the whole culture of the firm from project orientation to more of a client relationship orientation, and introduce the notion of the client feedback tool. And he liked the combination of the client feedback tool, which could measure other things, and NPS, because NPS had been shown in various studies to be a predictor of growth and success and profitability of companies. Higher the NPS score, the higher and the greater likelihood that this company would be successful. So that's how we got started. I contacted Ryan. I was somewhat familiar with the tool. And I spent a day with him instead of having to pay for a week of his time to come for a day to Asia because of how difficult it is to get there, how much time. Even from Hawaii, even though I'm 6 time zones closer, it takes me 20-something hours door to door. So I essentially became the Ryan in that equation, trying to learn all I could to help them with their onboarding of the tool. Now, I guess my next slide would say challenges. We all have them, and some of them we all share. We had multiple offices, multiple time zones, multiple personalities, multiple business units, multiple service lines. On top of that, we had a few that maybe you don't have. We had those multiple cultures. Even in the Singapore office alone, I think there were 17 different cultures represented. And then on top of that, we had multiple languages. And on top of that, we had not just time zone differences, but working with client feedback tool folks who we were looking to rely on for questions that I couldn't answer. 12 time zones separated us, and as Charles is smiling back there, knowing that he had to deal with it at like 10 o'clock at night because the offices don't share any office hours. In fact, it's not even today there, it's tomorrow. So you've got fewer days in the week to communicate, fewer hours in the day, and on top of that, there are all these holidays that you and I have never heard of that seem to crop up every day. I get a message, such office will be closed today for such and such a holiday. Even within one country, SONA, that country happened to be India, every office was closed on different days for different holidays. Anyway, so those are some of the complexities. Let me come back to language. Even in countries that spoke English, Singapore primarily speaks English, Australia, Philippines, there are these idiosyncrasies. In fact, in India, I had fun learning about them. I started a notebook and I called them Indian syncrasies, about how the differences in their language just, people would say to me, okay, let's do the needful, or revert back to me, and we need to prepone this meeting. I'd heard of postpone. I thought that was ingenious, actually, to come up with a word for moving a meeting earlier instead of delaying it. Anyway, even in person, when you're communicating, you think there's less of a challenge to understand one another, but we all know what this means, right? Yes, we know what this means. In India, though, I had to learn what does this mean? And it means a lot of different things depending on the context and how fast you shake your head, apparently. Anyway, the language was an issue. We had some clients who did not speak English. So part of the challenge that we had to overcome was translating client feedback tool into multiple languages. And there were some nuances there. I thought that would be a simple thing, and we actually provided the translation because we have people speak all these different languages. But it's not just the tool itself. First, we sent an email out to the clients saying, we are going to be requesting your feedback. Look for this email, and here's the tool. So we had to translate that first email, then we had to translate the tool and all the subsections, and then the instructions, and then usually we sent a follow-up request that we had to translate, and then a thank you email as well. So we translated that into Mandarin for Chinese-speaking clients. We translated it into Vietnamese. We translated it into Thai. There's some subtle differences even within the context of offering the tool in their language. For instance, the managing director of the Bangkok office said to me, while it's true most of our clients aren't fluent in English, I think the introductory email should be in English instead of Thai because it will get their attention. They will think it's more serious, and even if they can't understand it, they'll print it out and they'll give it to somebody who speaks English to read it to them. And then after that, we can be more friendly and make it more easy and translate the tool itself into Thai so they're more likely to fill it out. That was a little subtlety that I learned, maybe applied more to Thailand than some of the other locations. But there was some resistance, as you probably each encountered in your company. So that's my next slide. The resistance came in the form of the usual, people who were just skeptical, people who don't like change, people who didn't want to do one more thing. But there were also some cultural nuances to the difference. There was, and the resistance. There was some fear. We started with the idea of doing a benchmark or a baseline survey. And people said, well, my project's in the middle of a phase. Can't we wait till this phase is over because then they'll be happier? And we had to explain from the start, it's not just about the score. And we wanted to take a point in time, survey all the clients. I got some other resistance in the form of, oh, you don't understand. Clients in India will never give us a 10 on NPS. They just are tough graders, will never get a 10. And what do you think the people said who had clients in China? You don't understand clients in China. They will never give us a 10. They're really tough graders. And what do you think the clients, people working with clients in Vietnam said? Same thing. That's a good guess, but I tricked you. They said something else. They said, people in Vietnam won't even fill this out. There's no culture of asking, much less receiving feedback in Vietnam. And plus, most of our clients don't even have email addresses. That turned out to be true. We ended up having to do some Vietnam interviews in person because they simply didn't respond to the multiple requests to fill out the survey. So you've got that added layer of complexity and challenges. But we finally implemented it. We did the baseline. One of the challenges was this company that had grown so rapidly that it kind of skipped over doing a lot of things that most businesses would do, which is have some systems in place, for instance. So I said, well, let's send all these surveys to your existing active clients. I couldn't get a list of who their active clients were. So I had to go to the finance people in each office and say, who are you sending invoices to? And then went back in time and found somebody else who could tell me what projects were recently completed. And we started with a list of 210, and 70 replied. So that was not bad. So I'm here to tell you that the tool works even under difficult circumstances and conditions like multiple countries and multiple languages. So it was a 30% response rate. And the NPS score, which the CEO was holding his breath for was 17, which is not bad, at least it's positive, but a lot of room for improvement. One of the biggest challenges was to make this not a marketing initiative, but to actually have it, as I said, change the culture and be part of how they do business. And that continues to be a challenge as they do more and more of these surveys, to have it go from me to them to embrace the idea. And so one of the things that I did along the way was try to celebrate the people who were doing this. And again, as you've heard, not about the score, but about A, sending the survey out, B, getting responses, and C, most importantly, following up. So I really wanted to celebrate those people. In fact, in this firm, they had a thing called the Spotlight Award. Anybody could give anybody else a Spotlight Award, which came with a $100 cash prize and a little paragraph about why they deserve it. So I singled out the people who were doing great with the client survey, sending and following up. And one of the things, just a couple of quick stories. Do I have a couple more minutes? Okay. One of their sweet spots was working with clients from the US who were expanding in Asia. So one of the women sent out a survey to the client, an American company in California, got rave reviews, all 6s and 7s, and a 10 net promoter score. Then she decided, after pats on the back, she would also ask the director or the director of administration and HR at the local company in Singapore for whom we had done the office. She got back 2s and 1.6s, and she thought, okay, something is not right here, and it shouldn't have been a total surprise because what she did, by the way, she followed up, she sent an email, she said, clearly you're not happy, can we get together and talk about this? They had coffee, and this was an opportunity for this woman to vent because she wasn't listened to by her own company. In fact, they had told the people, the real estate people in California, had told us, don't listen to the local people, we're your client, we're controlling this job, and you report to us. So she was able to close the loop and say, your people locally are very unhappy. We might try something differently on the next project. And they've done 2 projects since which have gone much more smoothly and with happy users as well as clients. One other quick story about how this has kind of become part of their culture. One of the guys, a young guy from Spain in the Singapore office, is getting his MBA at night. He came to me excited the next morning and said, we just learned about NPS in school last night, and I was the smartest one in the class. And he said, but I've been thinking all this talk about NPS and using the client feedback tool, I think we could do more to engage our clients and to really lift the experience that they have in working with us. I said, great idea. So we together co-hosted a workshop at lunchtime, invited people who have client contact, and generated ideas for how we could make the experience better when they call on the phone, when they come into the office, when they're greeted, when they come into a meeting room, et cetera. And then that caught on and was shared with other offices and other locations. So my advice in terms of lessons learned and a little bit of tips is to celebrate the successes along the way, promote the people who are doing well. I mean, promote not in a literal salary way, but celebrate them and work with those who are embracing it from the start and let everybody else see by example of what can be done and follow suit. That's it for me for now. I'll be around this afternoon if you want to explore a little more. Thank you very much.